All right, so I'm recording now. Going to launch the show on Audacity. And again, I don't know if this will be useful to anybody, but I just thought since I'm doing it anyway, I might as well broadcast it. So starting over again, this is the most recent episode of the periodic table that I'm editing here. This is my Audacity window. This is how it records out of my Alesis multi-mix mixer. I get up to 8 channels, different tracks. In this case, I had myself on track 1, Steve on track 2, nobody on track 3, and Corey on track 4. So that's what that looks like. So I'm going to close out the unused tracks just to clean up the interface a little bit. You can see here the show was about an hour and 10 minutes long. And I've already tested the audio. They all sound pretty good. What I use here in my setup is a noise gate / compressor limiter on my mic, which is a handy thing to have because I have air conditioning and such. I'm not sure how much difference you'll be able to hear. All right, I just bypassed that. Now, depending on how quiet your environment is, when I stop talking a little bit, you're going to hear my air conditioner running in the background, and you'll hear other noises. So that you can hear me breathing a lot more. That's a lot louder, the air conditioner. So what a noise gate does is it sets up a level that below that level, no sound comes through. So I'm going to turn that back on now. And now you're hearing the gating. Yeah, Jim says he can hear the AC. It's subtle, but it's there. So now that I'm gated, let me stop talking and hear what you hear. Now, I'm still breathing into the mic the same way that I was, but that's not picked up. And the air conditioner's not picked up. And me typing and drumming on the table isn't picked up. So those that's the purpose of having a gate, which is really handy, but it only cuts out sound when I'm not talking. When I am talking, like right now, while I'm talking, the air conditioner sound is still there. It's subtle, it's in the background, but it's still there. So what I always do is record about 15 or 20 seconds of room noise with the gate bypassed before I do anything. You can see here Steve was talking while I was doing that, but it won't matter because I'm only dealing with this one channel. So I use the label function in my Audacity, and I call that mic noise. So there's about 15 seconds there of room noise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Audacity's outstanding built-in noise reduction filter to take the air conditioning and the breathing out of my voice when I'm talking. Now, because my air conditioner isn't very loud, it's not as big a deal. But if you have a loud environment, like when I have Steve McLaughlin on, the Door-to-Door Geek, his air conditioner in the summer is very, very loud. And when he's talking, you hear it. It hums behind him. The option there is either have him turn off his air conditioning, which isn't, not really the best way to do it, or take some tricks here. So I do the same thing when I record him. I tell him to bypass his unit for 15 or 20 seconds, and I get a noise sample. So I've highlighted my noise sample here, going to the effect menu and going to noise removal. I'm going to say get noise profile. This tells Audacity what I consider noise. It's analyzing those frequencies and saying, okay, these are the frequencies that he considers noise. So now I'm going to select the whole track, go back to the noise removal menu again, and these are the settings I like to use. 48, 0, 750, and 0.15. These are not the factory default settings, but these are the settings that I've figured out over time work. So I'm going to click OK on that, and it's going to go through and remove the noise on the entire track, even when I'm talking. This part takes a few minutes. There's several parts of the process. I would say editing a show takes me 45 minutes to an hour on average. The longer the show and the more people are in it, the longer, because there's more processing that takes place. But a lot of that time is waiting for something to happen. There's not a whole lot of engaged and active time. Is this a process that requires a lot of resources? Well, the more resources you have, the faster it is. I don't know. I'm guessing you guys probably can't see the text on the screen. it's more hard drive intensive than it is the processor intensive. That's what I've discovered over time, is that when I am doing that, the faster my hard drive is, the better. Let's see, I'm going to put myself in the picture here. There we go. Now you can see me in the window. Yeah. I don't know if that's helpful to you or not, but maybe it'll humanize the process a little bit. So yeah, I found that on laptops and machines with slower hard drives, it takes longer. I'm doing this on a laptop now. Yeah, it can take a long time. That process can take a minute, or it can take 10 minutes, depending on your processor. Okay, so now that I've done that, I don't need this whole first 20 seconds or so. Let me hit play here and see. Welcome back, everybody, to... Yeah, so that's where I started recording. So I'm just going to click my little time sync here, which, no, actually, I'm not going to do that right now, but I'm going to select all of my tracks now. And you do that by holding down the cursor and dragging down, and that selects all of them. And I'm just going to hit the delete key on the keyboard, and that's gone now. So now when I click play right at the beginning, welcome back, everybody, to is where I start talking. And you'll get to see a little bit of the asynchronous nature, Aaron, that was just for you, of how I do a show. So now I'm going to zoom out here, and I don't really have to do much to anything else here. Levels are good. These guys, I've got a compressor. These guys both came through Skype, which has a really good compression. But there might be a time when you would want to run an EQ on somebody. In this case, I don't really have to, but let's say I do. I could highlight this track and go up to effects and go to equalization. And, you know, you've got your basic graphic EQ here, and you can move things around, do whatever you want to do just on that track. But in this case, everybody sounds pretty good. I'm going to play just a little sample of everybody so that you hear. So here's me. Really socially acceptable 100 years ago. And here's Steve.
God, I'd probably get a little upset and be like, what? The teacher made you wear that? And then like I would...
and then here's Corey.
Wear certain things like for, I don't even know what it was, but some wearable stuff that you could wear. Like,
so you can hear they're all, you know, they sound really good. I don't really need to do anything with that. They're both... you know, pros with good gear. So that I'm fortunate in that. I didn't have a lot of editing in this show. So I didn't have any things that I have to cut out. So this is going to be really straightforward. But I do go here to the end. If you've never watched this show, we named the show after the show, and then I record the intro. So here's my markers here where I had done different things. So here's where I ended the show. Thanks for being on the show. I'm calling it. We're done. That ends this episode of The Periodic Table. So that's how I ended the show. And here's where I went back and read the intros. Check one. Mic record. Hello. There we go. It's working. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Periodic Table, episode 24. She Probably Makes a Good Breakfast. Recorded May 18th, 2012. And brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. So that was my first take, and this was my second take. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Periodic Table, episode 24. She Probably Makes a Good Breakfast. Recorded May 18th, 2012. And brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. And I like the second take better, so that's the one I'm going to go with. So I'm just going to clip right in there. I'm going to drag my cursor down to get all of the tracks, and just Control X on the keyboard to cut, just like you would in anything else. And then I'm going to go, this was the end of the show. This episode of The Periodic Table. That was the end of the show. I don't need this, so I'm just going to drag down and just hit the delete key, get rid of all of that. Hit the home key on the keyboard. That jumps me back to the beginning. I've already got all my tracks selected, so I can hit Control V to paste, and there we go. That puts the intro, let me zoom in on it, in front of the show, so we'll play it as it is. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Periodic Table, episode 24. She probably makes a good breakfast. Recorded May 18th, 2012, and brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 24, take 24 of the Periodic Table. So that was good. There, you can see there was a little bit too much silence there. There's over 2 full seconds of silence there. So I'm going to cut 1 second of that out. I'm going to hit my synchronized tracks here. That's a handy thing because what I do to one happens to all the others. So boom, I just hit that. And let's go back and play that again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Periodic Table, episode 24. She probably makes a good breakfast. Recorded May 18th, 2012, and brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 24, take 24. And that sounds pretty natural. That's how I would read it live. I would do the intro and then wait a few seconds. So that we're pretty much done in terms of editing on this show. This was a very simple one. But here's one little thing I like to do. It just adds a little audio interest, particularly if you're wearing headphones or earbuds. If you're out jogging or whatever and listen to this, you'll pick up on this more than if you're just listening out of your phone speaker or even in your car. Excuse me. I'm yawning. I like to fade people a little bit left and right, not a lot, just a little bit left and right, because when you're sitting at a table, around the dinner table, having a conversation, people do tend to be, on your left or on your right or right in front of you. So it just kind of adds a little realism to the show. So I'm going to take Steve here, and I'm going to pan him 10% left. I'm going to take Corey, and I'm going to pan him 10% right. I'm going to leave myself in the middle. That's the way I do when I have 3. If I have 4, I'd go left, right, and I never go more than 10%. Anymore, and it starts to get annoying. I have listened to shows where people are panned 100% left and 100% right, and wow, is that annoying. It's like you feel like you're listening to a tennis match of some sort. It's unpleasant. But that's just a really soft pan that I like to do. Do you have to do that? Of course not. I like to. So now I have 3 individual mono tracks. I'm going to mix all of these down into one stereo track. So the way I do that is select all 3 of them, and I select that by holding the Shift key and clicking the track. Shift and click. If you just don't hold the Shift key, it just selects the track individually. But Shift does all of them. So I'm going to go up here to Tracks, and I'm going to click Mix and Render. And this takes a few seconds, never takes very long. Of course, the more tracks there are, the longer it takes, and the longer the tracks there are, the longer it takes. But typically 30 to 40 seconds is how long this takes. Okay, so now we have one single stereo track. Now, if you listen to this, it sounds pretty good. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Periodic Table, episode 24. She probably makes a good breakfast. Recorded May 18th, 2012, and even volunteered. Hey, well, put it on me. I want to see what it's like to read this with 2 minds, right? I'm in education.
A little upset and be like, "What? The teacher made you wear that?" And then I would confront the teacher and find out what's going on. He doesn't seem like the.
See, what's interesting here is as you look at it, you can almost see where I'm talking, where Steve's talking. So Corey's not bluffing. He actually means it.
He means it.
I didn't put it.
Well, this grass is near your house, so that's kind of your.
And that's because he's more compressed than I am. It says coming through Skype. Skype really compresses the signal a lot. Now, compression is oft misunderstood. But what compression does is it takes the dynamic ranges out, takes the highest parts and the lowest parts, and makes them closer together. And what that ends up happening in the long run is it makes your tracks sound louder. And people like tracks that sound loud. For whatever reason, that's just in the genetic makeup of people. We like things, the louder it sounds, the better we think it sounds. So what I always do, the last thing I always do after I mix everything down is I compress it. So I'm going to select this whole track. I'm going to go Effects, and I'm going to go to Compressor. And you can see here, I'm doing a really hard compression. I'm doing a 6.5 to 1 ratio. Actually, I often do that all the way up at like 10 to 1. I mean, I do seriously hard compression. I've got the attack time and the decay time really low because I want it to hit really hard. And then I've got my threshold way down there at -4. That means it's going to take all things all the way down to -40 dB, which is really quiet, and it's going to compress those. And these are just settings that I've played with over time that I think sound best. I can't really explain why they sound good or what's better about them. It's just what I like. And there are tons of different compressors that you can get that work with Audacity or external things or VST plugins, but this is just the basic compressor in Audacity, and it's the one I use and it's the one I like. So I'm going to just click OK on that one. And this takes a while. So what this is doing is it's going through and it's doing two things, really. It's a two-step process. It squishes down everything louder than -40 dB. And -40 dB is very quiet. I've set that threshold exceptionally low. So anything below -40 dB gets squished down to -40 dB. So that the end result would be a very, very quiet track, but a very even track. So anything above a whisper really gets crunched down to the sound of a whisper. And then the second step in the process is it amplifies it back up to 0 dB. So when it's done, you'll have a track that is very monotone in terms of volume. Every whisper and every shout will be at the same volume. It'll be at exactly 0 dB. Did that make sense? And so what you end up with is there aren't lulls, there aren't quiet parts, there aren't loud parts. It's just all loud. And if you were doing music like this, notice I'm doing this before I do any music. Because if you're doing music like this, it would sound terrible. Because the strings on the guitar and the cymbals and the everything would be exactly the same volume, and it would sound like static. So don't do this to any music you have in the show. This only works well for vocals. But what it does is it takes everything and evens it out, and you get, when you play it, you can play one of my shows. Pick any other podcast out there, almost any other podcast. There are a few that use a similar technique. But you take almost any other podcast out there, play theirs, and then leave all your settings the same, and play mine, and mine will be louder. It's not actually louder. Your volume settings didn't change on your device. It just sounds louder in your ear because the way I have it compressed and mixed. And so you'll see here when it finishes with the spinning cursor that I'm going to have a very uniform track. All the parts are going to look like this part right here, or this part right here. The whole thing with very few derivations, and that's what the attack and decay time does. Is that determines how quickly it starts compressing once sound is heard, and how long it takes it to let go once sound goes away. And this not responding dialog box you'll see often if you're using Audacity. And that's a coding thing. Audacity isn't properly telling Windows when it's done. So Windows thinks it's hung up. It's really not hung up. It's working. And you can see the hard drive light on the laptop just going crazy as it does this. And there we go. Now when we're done, everything is crunched down to 0 dB, and any variations are very minor. Now, one of the side effects of compressing like this is that the breath sounds, when I take a breath between words, get amplified just as loud as the voice. And it can be pretty annoying. Now that I've pointed it out to you, everybody who watches this from now on will notice that. And it's just a side effect. And if you don't like that, you can tweak your compression settings. But it's just something that I've decided to accept. So now let me play for you the first few seconds of it again with it highly compressed. I didn't change any volume or anything. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Periodic Table, episode 24. She probably makes a good breakfast. Recorded May 18th, 2012. And brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 24, take 24 of the periodic table. This is the show that didn't want to happen. But before we waste any more time, I'm going to move right along and say that the 24th element in the periodic table is chromium. That wonderful thing that we make chrome out of.
Oh,
you know what? You know what I just noticed there? Once I compressed all this up, is I only ran the noise removal on my own track. I'm going to play this again and listen after my intro. Listen really carefully. If you've got headphones in, if you'll hear. If not, turn your volume up. You'll hear noise come in because I forgot to run the noise removal on the other tracks. So listen to it right after I finish my intro. Let me, I'll zoom in a little bit so you don't have to wait quite so long. So it's right around here. We Makes a Good Breakfast, recorded May 18th, 2012, and brought to you by Element Opie Productions. ElementOpie.com. Welcome back, everybody, to... You hear that kick in there? In fact, if you look at the wave, you can see it. This is dead silent. This gets noisy. Welcome back, everybody. So that's something I forgot to do. And the only way to fix that is to go back and just undo everything. You know, we just undo all the way back till I get... Whoops. Till I get to the point where I don't have the mix and rendered anymore. I went back past the mix and render. So now in my undo menu, my next step is redo mix and render. So I'm just before that. So now I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to Steve's track. I'm going to zoom in here, and I'm going to find 10 to 15 seconds of when he's not talking and where there's nothing but whatever noise might be on his track, whether it's noise he's sending me or noise in my cables, or the source of the noise can be any one of things, any number of things, but there's noise on his track. So I'm going to solo his track, meaning it's the only thing that's going to play, and then I'm going to play it. And you can see the meters up here bumping just a little bit. There's ambient noise in his track. And if I solo Corey's track here, I'm going to do the same thing. You can't really hear it, but look at how that level meter is bouncing. It's not dead silent. There's noise there. Whereas I go to a section of my track where I'm not talking. Oops. There we go. It's hard to find where I'm not talking because I talk all the time. And if I solo my track and hit play, there's not the movement that you see there. There's still some, but not much.
My friends back in...
So,
Really?
I'm going to go back and I'm going to pick a chunk of audio there. This is where Steve's not talking. I'm going to take between 8:30 and 8:45, 8 minutes and 30 seconds and 8 minutes and 45 seconds, 15 seconds of audio. I'm going to go to my noise removal, and I'm going to say, get noise profile. That's noise. Nobody should be talking. That should be utter silence there. And then go back here and go to noise removal and use the settings that I like to use and let that go. And it's going to take about a minute. Check here and see if there's any questions. Yeah, you could start over, Jim, but the beautiful thing about Audacity is it has, I don't know if it's infinite, but it has a whole bunch of levels of undo built in. So you can just Control-Z, undo until you get back where you need to be. Now, if you're not multi-tracking, you don't have this option. If you're recording via a multi-way Skype call or a or a Mumble call or Google Plus Hangout, you just get one audio track, one stereo track, and you don't have that option. You can't change that. But I have that option here. I can do each track individually. And let's say this section right here. Let's see what this is.
I have.
That's Steve saying I have. Let's say that it was Steve dropping an F-bomb accidentally. I can go in, select his track here, click generate silence, and it never happened.
Yes.
Whatever he said there didn't happen. So that's the beauty of multi-track editing. You can take out what somebody says. You know, Steve has a coughing fit and doesn't get to his mute fast enough. I can cut that out without losing what the other people are saying. So that's why I always recommend doing multi-track editing whenever possible. It's more complex. You have to do more stuff to make that happen. But it's worth it in the long run. So now I'm going to find 15 seconds of noise on Corey's track. Noise removal. Get noise profile. And what you can do is find a section where nobody's talking and get a noise profile across all 3 tracks. But I find that's not as effective. I like to run noise removal on every track individually. It's just, you know, something that I have learned works better. And so now there's another minute there. So whenever possible, and in order to make that happen, I run up to 4 Skype instances at a time, going out of 4 different audio interfaces into 4 separate channels on my mixer that all get recorded. So it's complicated to do it this way. And you don't necessarily have to, but I like having that option. I have had times where I'd have like two guests on Skype, or maybe one on the phone, or whatever. And while one's talking, the other will have a conversation with somebody in the room with him. And maybe they think their mic is muted, and it's not, or maybe they're just rude. But that can totally ruin your podcast there if you don't have them separated. Or if you've got a guy who, drops something and there's a big boom crash, but the other person keeps talking through it, you can just mute that out. And it's never a big deal. So I think it's worth the effort and some expense, yes, of recording multiple Skype audio sources. Let's see, what do we have a comment here in the chat room? In your book that you're writing, did you start from the very, very basics for someone that might have just heard the word podcast for the first time, or for the point of view of the person that has at least a very basic general knowledge? To answer that question, I tried to, it is for newbies, but I'm assuming you're a technical person. So you need to have, you need to be familiar with computers and with software. I'm not going to explain to you what a sound card is. I'm not going to explain to you how to cut and paste. But you shouldn't need any specific podcast knowledge at all. The book is designed for noobs. That's what it's called. The Podcast Handbook, A Newbie's Guide. Now I have everybody muted. There's no silence. Now I'm going to go back to the very beginning now. I'm going to play that again. And again, it's so subtle you might not hear it. But I'm going to go here where the 2 tracks come together, and you'll see the silence should be, the noise should be gone now. elementopie.com. Welcome back, everybody, to, see, before there was a definite, you could really hear noise hit right there, and now you can't. So I've still got the pan left, pan right, so now I'm going to go back again, select my tracks, and go to tracks, mix and render. And we wait a couple minutes. I'll go back and see if there's anybody watching live who has any questions here. Not right now. Now's a good time for you to ask your question. We've got some time. And if you're watching this and you don't know what book is referenced there, I am currently in the process of writing a book. It's going to be an audio book, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to release it in an RSS feed as if it were a podcast. So chapter 1 will be, one podcast show, and chapter 2 will be another podcast. So if you're familiar with being a podcast consumer, that will be right there with you. I'm not going to release it week to week. I'll release it all at once. So basically you subscribe to the feed and your podcast player downloads all the chapters for you. And then you can just run through them at your leisure. I think that's how I'm going to release it. So it'll be an audio book about podcasting. But there will also be a PDF version available if you want to read it. And there will be a companion website that I'm going to charge for. There you go. It's a profit deal. So yeah, there'll be a companion website that will have extra information. It'll have videos, maybe this video. It'll have diagrams. It'll have forums where I will interact with people who have paid to be there. And I haven't worked out how much that's going to be. I think it may be a flat fee of like $50 and you're in it for life, or I may do a $5 a month subscription. I don't know. I haven't worked that out yet. All right, so now that I've got that fixed again, I'm going to select my track, go back to my hyper aggressive compression. All right, so the compression is done now, and you see this nice clean wave. So let me go back now and play that beginning and see if we hear where the sound jumps in. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Periodic Table, episode 24. She probably makes a good breakfast. Recorded May 18th, 2012, and brought to you by Element OP Productions. ElementOP.com. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 24, take 24 of the period. You see, that was nice and clean. I'm gonna turn that down and leave this running here. See how the sound jumps right up to 0? You know, I did that on the compressor. It's not peaking. You'd see a little red line there if it were peaking, but it's nice and clean, gets right up to sort of the maximum recommended volume of music. It's not going to peak the audio, but you see it stays there most of the time. It drops down when there's nothing, but there's not a lot of highs and lows. I mean, look at, there's not much bouncing there when I'm talking, or when Steve or Corey is talking. Stupidity. Mr. Steve Cherubino for his first time on the Periodic Table. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Mark. I've never been introduced that way, but I appreciate coming on this show to add stupidity.
Well, no, you were here for the stupidity, not necessarily to add stupidity. All right, so there's the show pretty much done. The next thing I need to do is add my intro and outro music. So for that, I go to trusty Dropbox, where I keep everything there. Go to my podcast folder. This is the Periodic Table, music, and there we go, Periodic Table intro. And I just drag the MP3 right into Audacity. I'm going to take the outro music there, Control X, standard Windows cut paste stuff, and I'm going to put it at the end there and paste it in. Now, this is what happens if I play it just like it is. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Periodic Table episode. Now, clearly, you don't want that. You want the music to come in, and then the voice. So, I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit. I'm going to pick my time shift tool. It's the little dual arrows. So I'm going to click this track and just drag it. I am now sliding it in time to where I want it. So switch back to my select tool. I can zoom in a little more. So you can see there I have, let me solo this, and I'm just going to play the intro music. So you see I built in a fade there, and Steve would say that's way too long. That's 19 seconds before it hits the fade. But I did that because that's where the music let me do it. You know, where he hit that, the sustained harmonic there was a logical place to do it. So I let the music tell me. I don't let the clock tell me when to do it. So now I'm going to slide this right in there. So my voice is going to come in right when the music starts to fade down. Everyone, and welcome to the Periodic Table. So that's a fairly smooth transition. I'm going to move it back just a little more. Music's still a little loud there, so do it again. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Periodic Table, episode 24. She probably makes a good breakfast. Recorded May 18th, 2012, and brought to you by Element OP Productions. ElementOP.com. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 24, take 24 of the Periodic Table. This is the show that didn't want to happen. But before we waste any more time, I'm going to move right along and say that the 24th element in the periodic table is chromium, that wonderful thing that we make chrome out of, known to add horsepower to engines for decades. But what you may not know is that chromium ore, in its pure state... So you see there is I come in at about 20 seconds introducing the show, and then for the next 43 or 4 seconds or so, 46 it looks like, the music is a bed behind me as I talk. You don't have to do that. Some people do that, some people don't. And then the music fades out over about 10 seconds. Let me go back. I saw a comment in the chat room. Looks like you have the music preset to fade out. Yes, I do. When I went in and clipped out this intro and outro music, I faded it right there where that big harmonic comes in. Let me solo that again. So rather than having to do that editing every time, I have the same intro on everything. And so that fades out where I want to start talking. And then it stays at that lower volume for about 40 seconds or so, and then fades out slowly over time. So you get that bed there at the end that we make chrome out of, known to add horsepower to engines for decades. But what you may not know is that chromium ore, in its pure... So when it's all put together, it sounds like I've got an engineer, working the faders and stuff, but it's all done ahead of time. So when I go back to the outro music, I'm going to zoom in here. I've got a clip here, the same thing. I've got a long, slow fade, and then a quick fade up. So I'm going to move that so that the quick fade up is right there when I ended the show. And so I'm going to go back here a few seconds before the music comes in, and you'll get the full effect.
Well, on your network, I like to promote my site, howtopodcast.biz, because we do the show Art of Podcasting on elementop.com. So just go to howtopodcast.biz, find my information there. You could also email me at mail@podnuts.com. Or, yeah, I'm an email kind of guy. Just you can email me there.
Or just go to the forums at elementop.com. We have a periodic table forum. Make your comment there. And who knows, if you're mean enough, you might be our scumbag of the week next week.
Can only wish.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for being on the show. I'm calling it. We're done. That ends this episode of The Periodic Table. So you see there, about the last 30 seconds of the show, the music fades in really slowly, over 30 seconds. So that's the point of the show where we're wrapping up anyway. And so it's just a natural thing that as we start wrapping up the show, the music starts to fade in. Again, it sounds like I've got an engineer and, there was a clock on the wall and he pointed at me or I pointed at him and we started it up. But no, it's all done at the end of or before anything is ever done. It's all pre-made. And then right at the end there, just because I always end the show the same way, that ends this episode of The Periodic Table. You've heard that 100 times. You don't really need a lot of clarity there. So I go ahead and let the music start overtaking me right at the end there. I could fix that using my shift tool. I could move it around so that it sounds like this. Thanks for being on the show. I'm calling it. We're done. That ends this episode of The Periodic Table. So you could have, a clear indication of me talking and then the music fades up. But I like the music to fade up and then hit at its loudest it's going to be right after I finish talking.
Can only wish.
Yeah. Thanks, guys, for being on the show. I'm calling it. We're done. That ends this episode of The Periodic Table. And then a 30-second fade out. Is that too much music? Yeah, probably. But that's the way I like to do it. 20 seconds at the beginning, 30 seconds at the end. But I'm a music guy. Music is important to me. So that's it. I have just edited this show. Done. Fini. That's all there is to it. Nothing left to do now but save it. which takes a while. I'm going to save project as a new project because I like to have a raw and an edited. Now, if you're just going to click save, the process is going to be almost instant because Audacity's been saving all along. It's not a big deal. But what I like to do is save it as a new thing. So if I need to go back, if I find out something messed up, I can always go back to the raw source. So I'm renaming it and hitting save. So what it has to do then is take all the files, just like 6 gigs of data and all the undo stuff, and it's got to filter through all of that and save a whole new file. Is it excessive? Yes, it is. Have I ever had to go back to the raw show? Not once. But I always do that anyway. Okay, so now I have it saved. The only thing left to do is to export it as an MP3. So I'm going to click export. I'm going to put the name of the show. I'm going to click save. And it's going to come up with it's either blank or in this case, the intro music MP3 tag. So I'm going to take all this, and I have some templates that I've made. So I'm going to take the periodic table template. I'm going to open that, and it fills in the artist name, the track title that I used, and the genre. And that's all I ever do. So in this case, the artists were myself, Mark Cockrell, and Steve Cherubino, Steve the Little Angel, and Corey Knapp. So I put, for this show, it changes every week. So I put the artist in there. And so this was episode number 24, and the title was She Probably Makes a Good Breakfast. So periodic table number 24, She Probably Makes a Good Breakfast. I don't do album number, track number, year. Genre is podcast, and most things you're going to have to write that in. And then I click OK. And this just takes a few minutes. But as you can see that I have now I have an MP3 file on my computer. I'll click play. And there's the show. But that's just there's almost finished, not completely finished. There's one last step I do. I have a file on my computer called, have a program on my computer, there we go, called MP3 Tag. So MP3 Tag lets me edit all sorts of MP3 stuff, but I've already done that. I don't need to do anything else. Audacity did everything but put an image in. So I'm going to go here and grab the logo. And iTunes is now recommending a minimum of 1400 by 1400 file size for logos. Not in the image, but in iTunes. So I'm going to click save there. And so now I have an MP3 with the image encoded. So now I play it, and the show logo comes up, and it starts playing. The only thing left to do now is to upload it to my syndication tool and then write the blog post that I put on Drupal.